Hello YouTube, my name is Isabella and today I'm going to be discussing all the books I read in February. February was chaotic. I managed to complete my TBR through the skin of my teeth. It's also my own damn fault. But I did complete 11 books in February, which is shocking. And weirdly enough, a lot of the books that I have read, I don't have like incredibly strong feelings on. Maybe I'll have a wrap up that's short for once, but we'll see. So the first book I read in February was The Black God's Drums by P. Djeli Clark. This is an Afro steampunk novella that follows a young girl who kind of unwillingly discovers that a huge weapon, the drums, are about to fall into the hands of like really terrible people, and she like sets out on a mission to like stop them, but also simultaneously proving herself to a ship's captain so she can like escape where she's currently living. She also has the influence of like a goddess in her head who's constantly trying to break free and like kind of create some chaos. For a novella, I think this was really successful. The depth of the world building and setting was excellent. It's set in New Orleans, so with different dialects and descriptions and like mentionings of like the histories of this world. Everything was so fascinating, and you really get a good sense of where we are in the world in such a short period of time. I also liked our main character a lot. I liked how resilient and kind of like annoying she was to the adults. The added element too of the gods being involved, I think, was another really bright spot in the story. I ended up giving it 3.5 out of 5 stars. It was really enjoyable. I'm still kind of learning what I like and don't like with novellas, so I'm still kind of feeling out the waters there, but it's one that I recommend. I think it was a really good time. And I already forgot to mention content warnings. Content warnings include violence, slavery / the Confederacy, racism, guns, and death. Moving on to a book that I reread via audiobook, and that is Chain of Gold by Cassandra Clare. Chain of Iron is set to come out very soon, tomorrow at the time of me filming this, and I realized that I remembered nothing from this, so I reread it. The audiobook was very enjoyable. I have like a 10-minute discussion about like plot points and stuff in here because it just felt like a chatty video that day. In terms of my enjoyment, like I love these. They're like candy or junk food. You just like can't stop listening and engaging with it. But the plot is a hot mess, but the characters I love. I ended up lowering my rating from 4 stars to 3 upon reread, but I still really enjoyed them. It's not like the best written book ever. You know, I also forgot the content warnings of this one. Content warnings include a pandemic / infectious diseases, death, loss of a child, alcoholism, and trauma. So this next book I fully thought was nonfiction for like years until I went to read the back when choosing it for my TBR and finding out that it's not nonfiction, and that's Difficult Women by Roxane Gay. But this is just fiction. It's an essay short story collection entirely written by Roxane Gay about difficult women, or women that society would deem difficult, and I really enjoyed it. The content warning list on here is vast, like a mile long. I'm going to stick them up on the screen because it's going to really eat up the runtime. A lot of these were so vivid, and how short they were, you got such a distinct sense of each character Roxane was writing. Speaking of her writing, I absolutely love her writing. She's a phenomenal writer. I can't wait to read more of her prose because I love it. It's so distinct and unique. These stories are incredibly dark and twisted and triggering. There was only so much I could take each day. Her writing I could have consumed all the time, but the content of it was a lot. I also had a couple stories that just entirely went over my head. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't understand, and I felt stupid reading them, but I ended up giving this 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. Can't wait to read more from Roxane Gay. This was a great experience, although very triggering. Please be careful. So I added another book and read via audio The Skin We're In by Desmond Cole. He details events that happen each month of his life in 2017 in the fight against anti-racism and discriminatory policies in Toronto, Canada. I knew this would hit me very hard and close to home because I am Canadian. Ironically, I am wearing a Blue Jays, Toronto Blue Jays shirt right now. That was not planned. Our news cycles still tend to be dominated by stuff that's occurring in the States, and especially stuff in terms of racism and terrible things happening closer to home. They don't get covered as much, and I was incredibly ignorant to things that are happening literally almost at my doorstep. So this is invaluable to me. I think I will return to this in years to come just as a reminder. Content warnings for the skim we're in include racism and discrimination, deportation, mentions of slavery, police brutality, and colonization. I love how it does not shy away at all. Desmond does not shy away at all at the very insidious and dark and terrible history of racism in Canada and the fight to fix racist policies that are still pervasive to this day. He also very much discusses the rights infringed upon Indigenous peoples. It was deeply upsetting, but super valuable. If you are into reading anti-racist literature, I really recommend reading this, even if you aren't Canadian. If I remember correctly, the next book I read because I was bored and didn't actually feel like reading. So I was like, you know what? Pick up a romance and hopefully that'll jumpstart the rest of your reading for the month, because at that point in time I think I was more than halfway into the month and had read 4 books. So I decided to pick up The Wedding Date by Jasmine Guillory. Content warnings include fat phobia and discussions of body image, microaggressions, and sex, but not explicit. This book has a lot of people split on it, and trust me, I now understand why. It essentially follows these 2 people who get stuck in an elevator together, and because of that they sort of start talking, and then on a whim the male main character asks her to go to a wedding with him because his wedding date failed and he used to date the person who is getting married. Our other main character agrees. I'm sorry, I don't remember their names at all. They were very forgettable characters. She decides to go on a whim and then romance ensues. That part, the actual wedding date and like the fake dating bit, was cute and I kind of really enjoyed that part, but the rest of the story was boring, vapid. Our characters are so hollow. While I liked them enough together, like they were fine, their interactions were cute, that's fine. The times they spend apart, you get to know so little about these characters that it's just boring. It's not a good story. They don't stand on their own. They are so flat. They are like paper thin characters. I also think the hero, the male main character, love interest, whatever you want to call him, desperately needed therapy. The whiplash you got behind some of his decisions and how he was like willing to fight his best friend for the mere thought of his best friend hitting on his not girlfriend was ridiculous. Say it with me. Communication. We all need it, folks. We all need to learn to communicate, especially in romantic relationships, and this was chock full of just characters fucking refusing to communicate, and it's so frustrating as a reader. And also the sex scenes were boring. They were like fade to black, but there were so many of those fade to black moments. It was just like, pick a lane, please, for the love of God, and it just didn't do it for me. I gave this 2.5 out of 5 stars. This next book is definitely my favorite of the month, like bar none, hands down, and that's The Unbroken by C.L. Clarke. This is set to come out like in the 3rd week of March. I don't remember the exact date, but this is a high fantasy adult debut. This follows 2 main characters, one being Touraine. She was kidnapped as a child and forced to work for her colonizers, and she basically was indoctrinated since childhood and then is forced to return to her homeland to sort of police the people there. And then the other perspective character is Luca. She is the princess set to gain the throne, but her uncle is refusing to like relinquish it to her. So she needs someone desperately to be a turncoat to sort of bridge the gaps between colonizers and like the oppressed peoples, and she thinks Touraine is the best person to do it. Content warnings include colonization, threat of rape and sexual assault, torture, influenza, and death and murder. This is a wonderfully complex and fantastically navigated story. There is so much packed in here that has real world commentary and effects in a fantasy story, and I think everything was just blended together so well. And C.L. Clarke was, for a debut, like absolutely fantastic. I'm so impressed with them, their writing, this world. Fantastic. Basically, the entire book is commentary on colonialism and how terrible it is and how violent it is. It is displayed throughout the world building, the characters, the plot. It's so fantastically done. I also love these characters and their dynamic. I plan to do a full, I think, video review for it, so I will leave that linked when it is live. This was a stellar debut. I can't wait to read the rest of the trilogy. I have my copy on my way to me. It's pre-ordered. I can't wait to have this on my shelves. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. It was excellent. I then went and read Concrete Rose by Angie Thomas. This is a prequel to The Hate U Give. It follows Star's father. This follows Maverick trying to navigate teen fatherhood and trying to change his life and get his life onto a better course, and how complicated things get so quickly. And this also was fantastic. Content warnings include gun violence, gangs, teen pregnancy, and murder. I think this book was so fantastic because it's excellent on its own, as its own story. It's pretty damn good. I do have one notable complaint, but it stands on its own. And as a prequel, it gives a lot of context to how Maverick behaves as Star's father. And this basically made me want to go back and reread The Hate U Give. Maverick as the main character was just stellar. Angie Thomas's writing is fantastic, and the way she captures Maverick's voice in here was like he leaps off the page. He was just so good, especially for like YA contemporary, like one of the best characters I've read in a very long time. And his arc and learning, growing, and trying to do better by his children was phenomenal. My one complaint is the final third of this book felt very rushed, but the ending itself I actually really loved. It was unexpected for me personally, but I think so much more powerful and genius. And I gave this a very high 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. I just needed it to be a bit longer, but it's still excellent, and I highly recommend picking it up if you were on the fence. I then listened to Dreadnation via audio, but this is an alternate history story. Basically, on the night of the Battle of Gettysburg, the dead start to rise again, and that shifts the entire landscape of this world. And our main character has been sent off to a school. She's learning the art of killing zombies to then have to go work for a white lady to protect her, but our main character has no plans of doing that and is desperately trying to get home to her mother. Content warnings include racism and racial violence, general violence, war, slavery, and death, and also like the Confederacy. This is another case in which I loved the writing, the authorial voice, and also the added narration was fantastic. I also could see our character so very clearly. She was so distinct and unique and kind of gruff and bristly, but just excellent. The story does get, I think, bogged down by some repetitive scenes and things just I think could have been tightened up a little bit. I definitely felt the length of this. I think it's about 450 pages, and it just needed to be shorter. I also love the very complicated friendship that develops between our main character and her friend, because they don't like each other at the beginning of the story, and they have to learn to work together, and navigating their very different experiences and coming together and like reckoning with that, I thought was one of the standout points of this story. Also, the ending, again, was so rushed. I complained about this one. Dreadnation takes that to the like highest degree. I realized how much time I had left in my audiobook and was like, how the hell is this book going to end? I ended up giving this 3.5 out of 5 stars. I do want to continue on and read The next book, I don't know if it's the final book. I don't want to talk about this next book because I didn't like it. And if it wasn't a book that was gifted to me so recently, I probably would have DNF'd it. And I'm very disappointed. That's Queen of the Conquered by Case and Callender. So this is set in a Caribbean-inspired nation world in which there's also been colonization. These colonizers have came down and put the natives in like absolutely disgusting and terrible circumstances. And Sigourney's family, who was one of the most powerful native families, were all murdered, and she managed to escape with her life, and she's sort of been biding her time to get revenge against the colonizers, and she is in a very difficult and uncomfortable position because she interacts with the colonizers, but they hate her, but also everyone else hates Sigourney because she's not doing anything. And this book is just convoluted. I think it's kind of a hot mess, and specifically immediately from the construction of the story, there's a lot of problems with it. Content warnings include genocide, rape, death and brutality, slavery, assault, slurs, and racism and colonialism. Our main character has the ability to read people's thoughts, emotions, and memories, and the whole book is basically her just looking at someone and getting their whole history. And you do it for every single fucking person. And it's just not a fun reading experience. I didn't like the writing. I think you could have had this power, but a lot of the other stuff just needed to be cut down. I also hated our main character. Oh my god. I understand she is meant to be unlikable, and I get it. And I like unlikable characters. I don't have to connect to a character to like them, but I did not like Sigourney. She was constantly talking about wanting to exact revenge, but what exactly does she do to exact this revenge? She just kind of sits there and again stares at people and finds out their past. It's like she does nothing. There's so little action taken by Sigourney that it's just so frustrating to be in her head and her as the main character. The one thing I did like about the story was I liked the mystery that was sort of unfolding and how things were not exactly as they seem, and trying to figure out what actually was going on was interesting, but the rest I didn't like. And I'm disappointed. I'm really disappointed. I thought I was going to love this story, and I didn't. I ended up giving it 2 stars. I then went and read Storm of Locusts by Rebecca Rohnhorse. I'm so excited to have read this one because I've been just loving everything Rebecca Rohnhorse has put out. This is the sequel to Trail of Lightning, a sort of post-apocalyptic story that focuses on our main character. She's a Danae monster hunter and is sort of tasked with like trying to figure out these murders that are happening in the first one, and then teams up with an unconventional medicine man to do the job. And this takes place like a few weeks after the events of that one, and I also really enjoyed it. Content warnings include blood, death and murder, gore, cults, and trafficking. I don't know what it is about this one that works so much for me, because on paper it's not exactly something I would love. This is incredibly fast, like cement brick on the friggin' gas pedal. It never stops, never slows down. That's usually a complaint I have when reading books, but these sort of feel like episodic installments and like a TV show, and also it being sort of urban fantasy, post-apocalyptic. It's sort of part and parcel with that kind of genre, like the paranormal thing, to be really quick and snappy. You get in, you get out, you get your story. It's great. I like the mythology and various characters and beings we interact with. I really like Maggie as a main character. She's gruff and really prickly, but is sort of changing and growing a little bit, and her arc is something I've really been enjoying. I like the sort of begrudging found family that's developing. The driving mystery and thing and agency for Maggie in here is just a plot point that I find very frustrating, although I liked how things were revealed and navigated in the end. And I'm now deeply, deeply disturbed, upset, and scared of locusts. So congrats. All the descriptions of the bugs were gross and terrifying. Thanks, Rebecca, for that. I gave this 4 stars. I really enjoy this series. And now I'm dying because I have no new Rebecca Rohnhorse books to come out. And we have no word on the sequel for this or the sequel for Black Sun. And I'm sad. The final thing I read in February, I didn't necessarily read it with a bang, but more of like a wee little sizzle or blip, whatever we want to call it. This metaphor has gotten away from me. I finally read The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald, one of the oldest books that I own. Oh, content warnings also include a car accident, death and murder, racial slurs, racism, and infidelity. I just thought it was fine. Like, I get it. I get what F. Scott Fitzgerald was going for in his themes. I just didn't think it was particularly that great or stand out. I did like that it was a lot more dramatic and scandalous than I was expecting. I'm surprised people are allowed to read this for high school, knowing how like high school react to any sort of controversy. For such a short book, I thought the writing was a bit verbose and overly descriptive at times, although I think the way the story is framed through the main character makes this book a lot more successful and meaningful. It was fine. I gave it 3 stars. It's not something was wowed by. I love how I mentioned that I didn't have too much to say, and I think I proceeded to film for like 45 minutes, so that was great. Maybe I'm just like feeling weird, or my brain's not feeling so great right now, because a lot of these books I genuinely did like, but there were some stinkers in their midst. Yeah, I liked what was I talking about? Yeah, I guess my brain just doesn't want to work for me properly today. Let me know down in the comments below your favorite read of February, and as always, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you again very soon. Bye.